Once upon a time, in a quiet village surrounded by rolling hills and deep forests, there lived a man named Daniel. He was not searching for riches or fame, but for purpose, a reason for his existence. From a young age, Daniel felt there was more to life than what was seen on the surface. Something invisible, something calling him in the stillness of the night. He read countless books, sought the wisdom of elders, but the answers always seemed just out of reach. The harder he looked, the further the truth drifted away. Frustrated by the endless questions life presented, Daniel climbed the tallest hill in the village. At the peak lived an old woman named Evelyn, a sage who was said to hold the wisdom of the world. Evelyn lived far from the noise of daily life, in a small cottage surrounded by flowers that seemed to bloom just for her. When Daniel arrived, exhausted and anxious, he found her sitting in silence, her eyes closed, as though she was in deep conversation with the earth beneath her feet. "Why do I feel so lost?" Daniel asked, desperate for answers. "I've searched for meaning my entire life, but the more I seek, the more confused I become. What is the purpose of this life?" Evelyn opened her eyes slowly, as if she had been expecting his question all along. She smiled, not with pity, but with a deep understanding. "You feel lost because you believe there is something to find," she said gently. "You search as if there's a destination, a single truth that will explain everything. But life is not a puzzle to be solved, Daniel. Life simply is." Daniel furrowed his brow, confused. "What do you mean? Isn't there a reason for all of this? A grand plan?" Evelyn shook her head softly. "Life has no set meaning. The universe doesn't owe us any answers. Seasons come and go, people live and die, and yet we chase after a purpose as if it's hidden treasure. But what if that treasure never existed?" Daniel felt a weight in his chest. "Then what's the point of living if there's no meaning?" Evelyn's smile deepened. But that's the beauty of it, Daniel. You are free. You're not bound by anyone else's expectations or beliefs. The meaning of your life isn't something you find. It's something you create. Every day, in every moment." Daniel sat beside Evelyn, his mind racing. All his life he had believed that there was a greater order, a secret to be uncovered if only he searched hard enough. But what if the search itself was the problem? What if the purpose of life wasn't to uncover some hidden truth, but simply to live? Evelyn spoke again after a long silence. "Imagine a man who pushes a heavy boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down each time he reaches the top. Some might call this man cursed. But what if, instead of seeing it as a curse, he found joy in the act of pushing the boulder?" Daniel thought of all the time he had spent searching, reading, questioning, seeking advice from teachers and sages. Maybe the search had been his own boulder, and maybe, just maybe, the boulder was not his burden, but his freedom. "What do I do now?" Daniel asked, his voice no longer filled with despair, but with curiosity, like a child discovering the world for the first time. Evelyn stood up and looked out over the hills and forests, her gaze peaceful. "Live," she said simply, "not as someone who is searching for meaning, but as someone who is fully alive. Embrace the uncertainty, and in doing so, you will find a joy that no answer can give. The meaning of life is not something you find. It's something you create with each breath, with each step." Daniel looked up at the sky, vast and endless, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to question it. There were no answers up there, only the open expanse of the unknown. And in that uncertainty, Daniel felt a lightness, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. He turned to Evelyn and smiled, not because he had found the answers he was looking for, but because he no longer needed them. The boulder was still there, waiting to be pushed, but now Daniel would push it with joy, not because he expected it to stay at the top, but because he had learned to dance with it along the way. The meaning of life, Daniel realized, wasn't something handed to him. It was something he had to create, day by day, moment by moment. And in that creation, he found his freedom.